Hello, I'm Alice Hutchinson, the owner of Birds Books, an independent bookstore in Bethel, Connecticut, and I am honored to be the host of Write America. The aim of this series is to help set the country back on a correct, productive course of freedom, justice, equality, and plain human kindness. Write America is a literary series created by author Roger Rosenblatt, featuring award-winning, nationally renowned authors and new and emerging writers in readings and conversations each week about how books and art might bridge the deep divisions in our nation. Write America creates the quiet power of art in our lives. It celebrates, the quiet power of art in our lives, the unifying power of the highest uses of language. In novels, stories, essays, and poems, we recognize one another as parts of the human family, one family. Roger Rosenblatt, the creator of Write America, puts it this way: writing makes justice desirable, evil intelligible, grief endurable, and love possible. So with that, I welcome you. And please join us every Monday evening at this time as many of the most beloved and distinguished writers in the country read from their works and talk to each other, and with you, in an effort to bring us together. If you missed our last week's episode with Ann Fadiman and Luann Walker, or any of the previous episodes of Write America, you can go to Birds Books Crowdcast channel and watch the recordings at any time. Tonight's episode is also being recorded, so if you missed something, you can go back and rewatch. Tonight's Birds Books host readings by and conversations with Meg Wolitzer and Delia Ephron. I will return at the end, after the readings and discussion, to bring your questions and comments to the authors. For those of you unfamiliar with Crowdcast, you might have discovered the chat to the right of your screen. Please feel free to comment there. But if you have a question, look at the bottom of your screen and you'll see an Ask a Question tab, and that's where I will go to look for your questions. The green link at the bottom of the page is also a link to this episode on Birds Books website, where you can purchase the author's books while supporting the bookstore and Write America. Our first speaker is Meg Wolitzer. Meg Wolitzer's many novels include The Female Persuasion, The Interestings, The 10-Year Nap, and The Wife, which was made into a film that garnered Glenn Close an Academy Award nomination. Wolitzer, who also has written books for young readers, was guest editor of the Best American Short Stories 2017. She co-founded and co-directs Bookends, a year-long non-degree intensive in the novel as part of the MFA program in creative writing at Stony Brook, Southampton. Please welcome to the screen, Meg Wolitzer. Let me find you here, Meg. There we go.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. It's a particular treat to be here, and thank you, Roger, for this program generally, which is so wonderful, and to Delia, who we're going to hear from a little later. But I will start, and Delia, actually, this one is for you. I'm reading something that I haven't read in a really long time. I'm going to read a little bit from my novel that was turned into the film This Is My Life, which Delia co-wrote with her sister, Nora. And I'm going to just read a little bit from the beginning. It was her sister who taught her how to hyperventilate. They sat facing each other on the bed and they panted together like a husband and wife in a Lamaze workshop. When they could just about take no more, they felt that identifying swoon, the oxygen leaving their brains for good, the cells dying en masse. One day, Erica put an end to it. She couldn't be bothered anymore, she said. She had other things to think about. Suddenly, her walls were lined with posters. Huge disembodied heads of folk singers loomed down from above the bed and the dresser. Voices started coming from the stereo speakers, trembly underwater sopranos singing about medieval wood nymphs and slain labor leaders. But the 1960s had already ended, and the records were strictly from the remainder bin. Buffy St. Marie had a big orange 99-cent sticker slapped over her face. Now Opal stood and breathed in the bad air of her sister's room and thought longingly of how they used to hyperventilate together and how all of that was finished. In the past, sitting cross-legged on Erica's bed, the two sisters would allow their breathing to quicken. It was those first moments that Opal liked best. Erica had made a rule that they must keep their eyes closed, but sometimes Opal would crack open an eye and watch her sister heaving for breath, her shoulders moving up and down. It was embarrassing to see this, but somehow necessary. If someone had burst into the room then, it would have seemed crazy. 2 girls gasping for oxygen when there was certainly enough of it to go around. But no one would burst into the room. Even the babysitters knew enough to keep their distance. Sometimes Opal could hear one of them practicing a routine in the den. She grew used to hearing the distant swoop and mutter of a voice, the rise and fall of words out of context. She rarely paid much attention, preferring the company of her sister. In Erica's bedroom, it was just the 2 of them, breathing and falling. One evening, when they were hyperventilating, Opal actually thought she had died. She thought she had slipped into some narrow, dark province where she would be held forever. It was like all the hiding places she'd ever found in the apartment, like the alley behind the refrigerator where you wedged your body in and stood flush against the humming coils and wires until you were discovered. And you always were discovered. That was a given. But now Opal felt as though she might never get out, might never come to. She couldn't move. She couldn't open her eyes. Goodbye, she thought, goodbye. She remembered Charlotte's babies at the end of Charlotte's Web and the way they had parachuted off into new, separate spider lives, calling goodbye to Wilbur even as a current carried them along. She had wept then, as she had wept pages earlier during Charlotte's death. It made sense to cry at someone else's departure, someone else's death. But this was worse. Opal was mourning only herself. She would be found in her culottes and headband and knee socks. She saw herself being lifted gently, held in some anonymous adult arms and carried from the room. That was when Erica reached out and shook her. Earth to Opal, Erica said, and Opal's eyes flew open like a doll's. You should have seen yourself, Erica said, but her voice was kind. No more was said about it. Together, the 2 sisters caught their breath and went into the kitchen to hunt for supper. There was always a babysitter around to serve as a vague supervisor. Their mother had hired a string of young comedians to take care of Opal and Erica when she herself was away, men and women whom she had discovered at various comedy clubs around the city. She paid them decently and gave them a place to stay and a telephone to use and a pantry stocked with interesting food. The apartment was never empty. There was always the sound of one of the babysitters in the background, obsessively practicing a routine. The babysitters were like extremely lenient, youthful parents who let you do what you want and eat what you wanted. Tonight, Danny Bloom, who was doing a 3-day babysitting stint, came out of the den and asked if they needed anything. He was a thin man in his late 20s with a body like a piece of bent wire. His humor, said their mother, was very physical. He moved around a lot on stage at the Laugh House, where she had discovered him. You 2 doing okay out there, Danny asked. Yes, Opal and Erica chorused. We're fine. Well, then I think I'll keep practicing, he said. I'll come out in time for the show. She said she's doing all new material tonight. When he had disappeared down the hall, Erica and Opal boiled water for wagon wheel pasta and slathered fluff on crackers. They ate in silence, and when they were through, they flipped through their homework for a while, dreamily shuffling pages. Illustrations of colonial life drifted by. Women in long dresses sat at butter churns. Erica and Opal looked up from their homework every few minutes, checking the clock. At 11:20, Erica carried in the television set, and Opal pulled the swivel chairs up close to the screen. Together in the kitchen, with the heat from the stove and the soft, granular light of the television, they waited for their mother to appear. Opal swiveled her chair in time to the music and thought of all the things that crowded around her. She thought of the people she worshipped in the world, her mother and her sister and the new art teacher, Miss Hong. A few years before, she had worshipped Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees. She thought she'd been shrewd about loving Mickey. Everyone else loved Davy Jones, and the chances of ever getting him were slim at best. More realistic to go for Mickey, she reasoned, with his elastic face and squinting eyes. No one else took Mickey seriously. They all went for the easy charms of Davy, the soft British accent, the tender skin. Opal remained patient, did not make a big issue out of her theory. She thought of Mickey constantly, wondered what time of day it was in California, and whether he grew discouraged by all the letters Davy received. But as the months passed and the flurry died down, Opal thought of him less, and somehow her love for him was unmoored. It had been her decision. She had not had to be forcibly restrained like some older girls at school who tried to sneak into hotel rooms or backstage. She had restrained herself, and suddenly She was way past the whole thing. Everything kept changing as quickly as a film strip, frame after choppy frame. You loved someone, and then you didn't, and then you loved someone else. You wept over a spider's death when you were 8, and a few years later you read that same death scene again with a cool, critical eye. You thought of ways in which E.B. White might have made the scene more true to life. You thought of writing to tell him. There were few things in the world that stayed hinged to you for very long. Each year there was a new teacher, a new arrangement of chairs and desks. Every classroom had a classroom pet, a guinea pig that drowsed in its window cage while you traced the outlines of the continents. You spent a whole year of your life caring for this animal, stroking its nervous fur and sliding in trays of pellets. And when the end of the year came, the animal was left back in the 2nd grade while you kept moving up. You all knew there would be another animal awaiting you in the 3rd grade, a parallel rodent needing stroking and holding and water and food. Now the commercials ended and the theme music began, and suddenly Danny Bloom raced into the kitchen and perched on the countertop. First there was the monologue, then a little joking around, and then Opal's mother was brought on stage. Sitting between Johnny and Ed with the skyline tableau stretched out behind her, she gestured broadly and flooded the entire screen. In that moment, the men disappeared, were swallowed up, and even the skyline was eclipsed. All that remained was an ocean of dotted fabric, her mother's fashion trademark, and the helpless laughter of the studio audience. They kept laughing and didn't show signs of stopping. "I'm glad she's on first tonight," Erica said. "Not like last time when that woman from SeaWorld was on with her animals and Mom got like 4 minutes." Things had changed since then, they acknowledged. Their mother was now allowed to come on first and ease into the still cold chair by the desk. She was frantic tonight. She was huge and luminous. My mother the moon, Opal thought. My mother the explosion. Opal could not take her eyes off her mother. She was madly in love with her, as was half the country. Everyone wanted to meet her, talk to her, somehow nudge up against her. "It's worse in California," Opal's mother had said. "Out there, everyone's lying in wait with their autograph books. They expect to see celebrities." When the audience quieted down, the camera closed in tight, and her mother said, "I'd like to take this moment to send a special message to my daughters back in New York." No one moved. "If you're watching this, Opal and Erica," she said, "then you're in big trouble. You're supposed to be asleep now. It's a school night." It was like talking to her mother on a television phone, the kind that My Weekly Reader had insisted would be installed in every home by 1970. Opal had lived in fear. What if you were on the toilet and the phone rang? What then? But the threats had proved idle. My Weekly Reader also swore America would go metric within the next few years. Opal had been terrified, knowing her own stupidity with ounces and kilos. But this, too, was just a scare designed to alarm. Her mother showed up on television, sent satellite love messages to the East Coast, and later that night, after the credits rolled and her mother stood as if at a cocktail party with Johnny and Ed and Rita Moreno, Opal drew back the blanket on her bed and slipped inside. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meg. Our next speaker is Delia Ephron. Delia Ephron is a best-selling author, screenwriter, essayist, and playwright. Her novels include the New York Times bestseller Siracusa, and she has written books of essays and humor, including How to Eat Like a Child. Her many movie credits include You've Got Mail and The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Her play, Love, Loss, and What I Wore, written with her sister Nora Ephron, based on the book by Eileen Beckerman, ran for 2 years off-Broadway and has been performed all over the world. Her memoir, Left on 10th, A Second Chance at Life, is published this month, actually last week, by Little Brown. Please welcome to the screen, Delia Ephron. Let me find you here, Delia.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Birds Books. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Write America, and Roger Rosenblatt. This is a wonderful, wonderful thing that you're doing. I'm going to read a bit from my new memoir, Left on 10th. I'm going to read you from a couple of different sections to give you a sense of the book. And this is part of the prologue. Left on 10th is my way home. I was left on 10th when my husband died, and after that, life took many left turns, some perilous, some wondrous. This book is about all of them. The first section of the book is about the night that my beloved husband of 32 years died, and he was at home with me, and that was what I had dreamed that he would be. And this is from that section, which is called Left. I don't know how I suddenly realized Jerry had gotten out of bed and was careening toward the bathroom. I shouted for the nurse. She came upstairs, and we caught him as he fell, breaking his fall but unable to stop it. He was on the floor. It was 10 at night. As instructed, I called 911. The next thing I knew, there were 5 EMTs in my apartment. I said, I just want you to lift my husband and put him back in bed. I showed them the DNR and healthcare proxy. They said no, that Jerry was now under the jurisdiction of the fire department and he was going to the hospital. I protested. I waved the forms. Well, one said, in this case, we'll take him to the hospital and you can show them the documents and bring him right back home again. I started to cry. I swear, I don't know if I was crying because I was so upset and so frustrated and so helpless and so sad, or because I knew instinctively it was the only move left. I just started bawling and wailing. I've spent months trying to keep my husband at home, doing everything I was supposed to, getting all the documents, everything, so he could die here in his home with me, in his bed. And now you're telling me that he can't? They got nicer. All right. Right now, I'm going to skip to another section. It is now 6 months later, and I am disconnecting Jerry's landline, and I am in a huge battle with Verizon. So I wrote an op-ed about it for the New York Times. Love and hate on hold with Verizon. I know it's not a good idea to hate anyone. I know from an article I read today that negative emotion is bad for my health. I would hate to have a heart attack because my internet isn't working, but I absolutely hate Verizon. I spent 4 hours on the phone with them on a recent Saturday morning. I know for sure I was disconnected 3 times. Once I didn't realize it and just hung around for 20 minutes expecting someone to come back on the line. One person promised me he wouldn't disappear and even said, "Have I yet?" I said no, and then he disappeared. So I'm going to jump from that time to the fact that I then get a letter. Oh, by the way, I just want to say that most of the country hates their phone company, and many people have been embroiled in that kind of problem of disconnecting a mate's landline or cell phone, and it ends up a catastrophe. So when I wrote that piece, I got many, many pieces of mail. And 5 months later, I got this email through my website. This is a section of the book called Peter. Dear Delia, Peter Rutter here. We knew each other. Your big sister fixed us up when you were a frosh at Connecticut College, I at Columbia. My sympathies on the loss of your husband and sister. I am now a psychiatrist, Jungian psychoanalyst in the Bay Area, and writing you because of several confluences. Syracuse and your Times piece about disconnecting your late husband's phone, which closely match my attempts to do so with my late wife's phone. Syracuse, love the book. The last significant journey my wife and I made was to Sicily, Syracuse. We stayed at Domus Marie in Ortigia, which just about matches your cover photo. She was also a Jungian analyst and died in March of lung cancer. Not a smoker. I'm trying to heal up by hiking in and out of the Grand Canyon. Done it twice in the past few months. I'm still working. We had 2 kids now in their 30s, and a blessed goddaughter came along in September. If you have any interest in further conversation, clearly I do, email me or phone. He included a number. Be well, Peter. I Googled. There was his practice in Marin County in San Francisco, but I could not find a photo of him. I mean, there were photos of many men with his name, all different varieties. I had no idea if one was him. But then I found books he'd written, Sex in the Forbidden Zone and Sex, Power, and Boundaries. I read some reviews. Good grief, how amazing. He was an expert in sexual harassment. I waited a couple of days. God knows why. Delia to Peter, Saturday, October 29th, 2017. No. Yes, 2017. Hi, Peter. Good to hear from you. Strange that you and your wife's last significant trip together was to Syracuse, and you also battled Verizon over shutting down her phone. And your email handle is Confluence. Speaking of which, several weeks ago, I accepted an invitation to speak at a Jungian conference in Texas and was thinking I'd better figure out what a Jungian is. Glad to hear you love Syracuse. Thank you. I'm embarrassed to say, I mean truly, that I have absolutely no memory of our date, and I hope you don't either. Although being an analyst, you probably have better recall. Nora fixed us up? How did you know Nora? Impressed you've been hiking the Grand Canyon. It seems so smart for a million reasons. I don't hike unless you count across the village to a bakery, but I respect it. I can see where right now, where you are, it would test you, expand you, remind you how we're all just passing through, a tweak to love it while you're here. I'm trying to figure out who I am exactly, this new whatever version. I live in paradise, Greenwich Village. Every day I walk outside and think, I can't believe I get to live here. And I have amazingly interesting and devoted friends and family, so that's nice. I noticed Googling that you wrote Sex in the Forbidden Zone and Sex, Power, and Boundaries. That is you, I take it. How did that subject find its way to your heart? So Peter and I begin to write emails, and then we begin to talk on the phone for hours and hours and hours. And within a very short time, like a few weeks, we are pretty much madly in love. And it's magical. And one single thing about all this, we were both 72 and age meant nothing. We were getting as loopy, as obsessed with each other as anyone, falling under the spell of romance. I tried to push away my guilt. All my friends said, Jerry would be so happy about this. Really, everyone assured me that Jerry could not have been happier. It was kind of them for sure. I certainly would be happy if I had died and Jerry had found someone. But all this sex, would he be happy about that? And I want to apologize for even mentioning sex. No one wants to hear about two 72-year-olds getting it on. In a movie, I know if you have two 70-year-olds simply kissing, you want the camera far away, like out the window or across the street. But our attraction was an essential part of the magic. So we fall madly in love, and all the emails between us are in here. It was a powerful, powerful connection. And 4 months later, I went to my doctor for my blood test, and I had been being tested for 10 years now, every 6 months, because they were very worried I might get leukemia the way my sister did. And I'd always just gone and nothing had ever happened. So 4 months later, Evgeny, Dr. Robos's PA, is looking at the computer screen at the results from my blood just taken. They're not normal, he says hesitantly. What? He's studying the computer. Dr. Robos comes in. He gets up. She sits down and looks. It's not normal, I say? She tells me something. I don't remember what exactly, to the effect that it could correct. I can come back in a week. As she is sitting there, the rest of the results come in. Results that leave no doubt. I have leukemia. I don't remember telling me. I don't remember her telling me. I only remember suddenly knowing it. So I get sick and I have leukemia, and I check into the hospital next week, and Peter and I get married that Saturday in the hospital, having known each other 4 months, and Peter really never leaves my side. And I have, in the course of this treatment, I have 2 experimental medical procedures, one new drug and one new way to get a stem cell transplant. And so that is why I am here today reading my book to you. But I just want to say that there was this moment when I was in remission. And remission is very powerful because it's both the sense that you've been given a second chance, and with me, at least, a fear that death was still behind the next lamppost. So we went to the eclipse, we went to the solar eclipse, and we went to Oregon, to the desert in Oregon, because Peter was sure that that was where there would be no cloud cover. Here's what's amazing to me. The moon is 2,159 miles in diameter and has no light of its own. The sun is 864,938 miles in diameter, and its radiance lights the world. For 90 seconds, because of the alignment of the sun, the moon, and Earth, this little moon takes over. It shuts out the sun. To me, the solar eclipse is an underdog story, the all-time underdog event, the triumph of the small and weak over the giant and mighty, a seemingly impossible feat. And this is the last thing. The eclipse feels personal, although I'm embarrassed to compare my experience to this astonishing event. Is that underdog moon a metaphor of me versus the mighty leukemia? Thank you. Left on 10.
I love hearing that. I've read it. I loved it. It was better than Cats.
Thank you.
How did you pick? I mean, the book is like the book of everything. It's just got life and love and death and loss and happiness and friendship in it. Was it onerous or actually fun to kind of? I know your book is just out. You're on your tour. Some of it is virtual. Some of it is real life, I guess. How did you pick what to read?
Well, I just wanted to give a sense of the range of the book, that, that it begins with Jerry's death and what the drama, the incredible drama of that night. And then I wanted you to feel the magic of meeting Peter. And then I wanted to give a sense of when everything turned. So that's why I did it that way. And I didn't include, I guess, the last section, which is really about love and medicine. Yeah. And how I survived that. But also, people have mentioned things to me that they loved, and I tried to, get at that stuff. But
was there one particular thing that kept coming up, like one scene that people wanted to hear?
Well, everybody wanted to hear about how that nobody wants to hear about 72-year-olds and stuff.
I know. Oh my God.
That to me, that gets quoted to me all the time. And then in a movie, if you have two 72-year-olds kissing you at the camera, as far as it could possibly be.
Great shot. That's hilarious.
Right.
That's funny. Well,
but I always like the drama. I mean, that for me, drama is always what drives stories. So that, that even true story, that's always important to me. So that was significant. Right. So amazing to hear you read from This Is Your Life. Right. Wait, which is it?
No, you know what? When they it was reissued and they called it This Is My Life. So we can call it that now.
Oh, okay. This Is My Life is the book was originally published as This Is Your Life. And when Nora and I adapted it, we made it This Is My Life. Right. Yeah. And Opal and Erica, they are the most perfect siblings. I mean, it was so magical for Nora and I to collaborate on that story because it was just made for us. And a working mom whose conflicts, we had a working mom. So it was, just a fantastic opportunity. And then we all became friends, and that was just an amazing thing.
Well, I thought tonight, I was thinking, oh, I'll just, well, I don't have a new book out. You do. And I was just sort of going to kind of go for one of my old hits. I mean, I don't mean my hit, one hit, whatever. And then I thought, oh no, I'll read that because I haven't read that. In fact, when I first met my husband, Richard Panic, he came to all my readings. That's love, right? I mean, every reading. And I was reading from that book. And there was this one line that I actually didn't read tonight, but it was in that scene. I was just sort of cutting and pasting. There was one line and it became kind of a private joke between us. It was the line referred to the beefsteak laugh of Ed McMahon. So he had heard that line about the beefsteak laugh of Ed McMahon so many times that we would just like hated our own work, when you can just look at it objectively in some funny way. Anyway, but yeah, it has been a really long, I have not read that. And the time was right.
What was that? Do you know? Do you remember?
What year did the book come out?
Yeah, we went to the movie. It was Norman.
And the movie was that. And by the way, I'm just going to turn this. Look, wait, there it is.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Well, the book came out in 88, and the movie came out in 92.
Oh, okay.
So this is like I don't know. I mean, you've done amazing things, and you continue to, which is just, so wonderful. But I look, I love your book, and I don't want to hijack that and not talk about your book, but I will say just very briefly. So we met, in the years somewhere between 88 and 92,
right?
Because it took a long time to get that movie made, because it's a movie about a mother and her two daughters, and you guys went stumping around to the studios to get it made, and we got it made. You got it made, and we became friends as a result. And we both came from families of sisters. I only have a sister, and you had sisters. And I have a mother who looms large in my life, and who is also who's a celebrity to me, like Dottie, the stand-up comic who in the movie was played by Julie Kavner. And if any of you saw it, you were the ones, who saw it.
Well, I mean, Hilma Wolitzer, which is your mother's name, is
here tonight.
She just had a short story collection published called "Today A Woman Went Mad in the Supermarket," and I reread it over and over again because I learned from it. There's a way that your mother tells a story that is just, it's so brilliant, and it's so smart, and she's funny and sexy and everything. I mean, she's really amazing. So every time someone asks me what I'm reading, I always say I'm reading that book, because I'm rereading it.
It's great.
Amazing book.
Well, I think it is absolutely wonderful. Story. So the word story comes up a lot. I sometimes forget about story. I mean, maybe I'm hardwired for it, but every once in a while, kind of like mindfulness meditation, I'm like, oh yeah, something has to happen. And then I gently bring myself back. But you are much more inclined to story very naturally, I think.
Yeah. Well, first of all, yeah, I love that need to turn the page. I really like it. And also Jerry, my husband who died, was, fantastic teacher of drama. And he taught me all about how to move plot and things like that. And I love to do that. And one of the things I loved about writing Left on 10th was I could see when I got healthy enough to think, oh my God, life gave me this story. I knew that it had all the drama it could possibly need. I mean, it had the loss of him, and then the magical falling in love with Peter, and then this threat to my life. I mean, it had and I knew it had heroes. I knew which stories need, and Peter was a hero in my book, amazingly, and my doctors were heroes. And so I knew that I had these ingredients. And when I think of a story, I do think that way about whether I have, I guess, plot. I guess you'd call it plot.
Does it need an anti-hero? I mean, is the leukemia the anti-hero? Or?
Oh, yeah, I think that's true. And guilt and fear. And, when you're losing someone and you have no control over it, that death is the anti-hero. And surviving becomes difficult. So then that's what you're battling. I mean, that there's a section which is that year when I was alone, and everything is deranged. You're completely distracted. I couldn't go to parties because I didn't even know who I was. There was some way that my identity had been damaged by losing Jerry. I can't even really explain it that well, but so I had that to write about, and then falling in love, which was, oh my God, it was such an amazing experience to fall in love. I mean, remember what that feels like. You know, you fell in love with Richard 100, like a long time ago. It's like you can't believe what romance, the power of romance. And I was so lucky to have it. And then it's just squished out by the leukemia 4 months later. Except Peter, really. He just really did save me.
He's amazing. Yeah. He was there every minute, and he's a doctor, so he could handle the medical stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he really could. He did really stay at the hospital. I was in the hospital 100 days when I had my bone marrow stem cell transplant. And I weighed like a pound by then, and I wasn't eating anything, and I was very, very close to death. And, he just never left. And I think it was partly his medical training, and it was partly the freshness of our love. And he was just there. I mean, the few girlfriends that took this journey with me, because my book is also about friendship.
Yeah.
It's about these amazing women warriors I had by my side. And I think friendship, when you get sick, I mean, hopefully you'll never have to experience this, but when you get sick, you realize what you've done right in life. And you realize things probably that you haven't done as well at. But I knew I had done friendship well, that I had the greatest friends that anyone could have. And they were just phenomenal.
Well, it's a talent. I mean, it's another talent for friendship. I think so. I think you absolutely do have it. People want to be around you.
I think having siblings kind of prepares you for friendship. I mean, sisters. I don't mean siblings. I mean sisters.
I always thought people who had brothers was like a whole different thing.
Yeah, that's right. They're not friends, but they prepare you to know what a good friend is.
No, it may prepare you for relationships with men if you want that. I mean, I don't know because I don't have, a brother, but it seems so like strange, like to go to a friend's house and there was like a boy slinking around in the background. It was like, ooh, it was
yeah, that's true. You didn't know anything about boys. That's true.
No.
Yeah.
I know about that. I'm really young, but girls, everything, right? Like curlers to menstruation to everything. I know. So now that you've written this, I mean, this really was everything that you'd been thinking about and experiencing for some years, right?
Yeah, it is. It's like it's a huge thing for me because I guess it began with the night Jerry died in 2016, and then 2017 I was coping with that, and then Peter turned out exactly almost a year later, and then that began that amazing love affair, and then the leukemia. And then COVID, and then 2 years after that was amazing because I went to see my doctor 2 years after my bone marrow transplant, and he said, "This worked. You're no more likely to get leukemia again than I am, and I've never had it." And I practically danced out of there. And the next month in March, the whole world shut down from COVID, and it was so I've been kind of out of the world for quite a lot of years.
Yeah.
Because we're not really in the world right now. At least I'm not really in the world right now. I don't know if you are, but I actually haven't eaten inside a restaurant, in so long. I don't even know, 4 years now or something.
I know. We need like
I wasn't allowed to. You see, when I was sick, I wasn't allowed to go to the theater or, so I was, sort of in that situation before it all hit.
Do you think we'll ever learn how to do it normally? Do we need to take etiquette classes?
I don't know. The world seems so different to me. It really does. I mean, just to walk down the street in Greenwich Village, it feels very different. It's different stores. It's different. I mean, it's very different. I mean, things I loved are just gone. My supermarket, I mean, is gone. You know, that had fresh mozzarella and all sorts of wonderful, delicious things.
Is Paget and Valentina?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I know. Well, yeah, the downtown one. I know.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. And also, there's so much else going on in the world now that it's a very difficult time to figure out.
Well, I'm actually speaking to that a little bit because that was, Roger's idea of having these readings. I mean, do you think that, can you feel hopeful when you're writing now, or is that out of the question? Or reading, rather?
Writing is where I'm always hopeful. Writing is this place where I go into my wonderful little office here, and I just spin stuff, and it's like the rest of the world. I might be writing about the rest of the world, but the process of doing it is fantastic. I think that making your living by your imagination is one of the greatest things you can get to do in life. So I feel the one thing I feel I got lucky with was a writing career.
Yeah, same.
Don't you feel the same way? It's what you are. It's a calling. It's almost it's a religious calling, but it's not a religion.
I agree. I remember, when Trump won the election in 2016, and Richard just went to bed like, I can't deal with it. And I was editing Best American Short Stories, and I had all these short stories in this office, all on the floor, spread out in piles of, what I'd read and what I liked. And I'd been reading them up until that night. And I took a look at them after my husband just went unconscious because he just didn't want to be awake. And I thought, how am I going to go back to these stories and care about them? And how are people going to read again? It's all anybody's going to be talking about is this news, and it seems so surreal. And how are we going to care about it? And I ended up writing my introduction. I talked about this a little bit in Best American Short Stories, the 2017 edition, about how we need to return to the reading experiences of the past, to imagine the reading experiences of the future. And I think that's true for writing as well. But it is certainly true for reading, because I don't know about you, but my reading has changed. It's harder now because I think I spend so much of the time wanting to know what's going on in Ukraine, feeling so much for people, seeing what people are doing, hearing about the latest numbers in New York for the pandemic. I mean, trying to help a friend, whatever it is. I mean, where is the inviolable time for reading, and how can we make it matter? So that's something I think about a lot.
Yeah, reading requires a sense of peace. See, I don't think writing does, because there you said you were struggling with these short stories, and then you turn that struggle into the piece that you wrote. And that's what the gift of writing is, that you can take whatever's churning inside you and you can make something out of it. And it's while you've been doing that, you're actually feeling like more control. You're getting the joy of
more authority when the world feels like it's out of control.
Yeah, right. So I think that's what, where writing really helps. One of the things I noticed in your book, this is sort of slightly off the subject, but you wrote about Charlotte's Web.
Yes.
And I wrote about Charlotte's Web in my book too, because my dog is named Charlotte, after Charlotte and Charlotte's Web, because of that great thing he says, that when she dies, he said she's a true friend and a good writer. And that's all I've ever wanted. And I think that book, Peter and I were listening to it in the car on audio because he reads it, E.B. White. And it's amazing. I think it's such an incredible, I think he's really my favorite writer, I think. So
it's there with my favorite books. I mean, whenever I've been asked to do that list of your favorite books, I just want to throw it in with, it was the first book I cried over. And the idea that, you could care about what happened to a spider, what happened to a pig, you can extrapolate from that there are other beings, there are other sentient beings, friends. They have, what's going on in other houses. I remember when I was growing up, there was a girl around the block who had just moved there, with her father, and her mother had died. And it was just her father, who seemed older, and her. And I spent a lot of time. I couldn't imagine. I was about 8. I could not imagine what it was like being in that household. And I tried to imagine being her. Like, I made it into a sort of novel. What is it like being someone else? And I think that's what we go to fiction and memoir and poetry, apparently, for, all kinds of things for that. What is it like to be in the membrane of another person?
It's an act of empathy, actually, I think, I think the best writers have empathetic, probably not all of them, but of course the women writers I love, I feel are very empathetic.
And I felt that in your book so much, like that scene that you read before where the doctor comes in and looks at the stuff. I almost felt faint when you read that idea of, like, you can't cheat on a blood test. Like, we feel like we can sort of cheat our way through things. If you talk well, somebody will give you extra points for something. And we've had that experience in life. But this is like yes or no. You can't to affect the outcome. And whatever she says is true. And you can't do anything about it. And you're just vulnerable, and you don't know anything about this world. They understand blood. You don't. And I felt just almost dizzy imagining you in that moment. I felt for you so much.
It was it's a transforming moment, because they won't take it back.
No, you're not like
science. It's there, and now who are you, and how are you going to deal with it? I mean, it's and the truth is, almost all of us will have moments like that, if not for ourselves, for people we love. That as you get older, you start to, I'm in my 70s now, and I'm 77, and the phone rings all the time, somebody telling you something that's going on with them. And what's amazing is that you can. I can't say you can live around it, but you can live with it, and that seems, when you're healthy, that seems almost unimaginable that you do. I mean, Peter and I went into remission, and we went off to see the eclipse and had an absolutely transforming experience. Life does go on. That's one of the things that's so unbelievably fabulous and upsetting about it.
I know, it just keeps moving. It keeps moving on. It doesn't wait in some way, at all. I think that, like, I find college alumni magazines really fascinating, because they are like the book of everything. Like your book, they've got who had a baby, who died, what professors died, and then you could rent a house in the back. You could go on a tour with a professor, and then there are like the young people and the great stuff that they're doing from class 26. And it's like it breaks your head, because there's so much going on all at once.
I know. One of the things I think has been so hard about COVID, if you're older, which I am, and is that first of all, we got targeted, if you're an old person, you're going to get it and die. When that was dying, and you sadly lost your father in this. So, it was just simply terrible. But also there was a sense that because the world shut down, we were even more shut out of all the changes. And there've been so many changes during this time, with the Black Lives Matter movement, and the music culture changing, and the film culture has changed. And so storytelling has changed, because there's no more film business. And so that, if you're older, I found myself very shut out of cultural changes going on. And now my world is still shaped by the things I loved before. But the world is really different. I mean, I actually, this is like so silly, but I used to do Twitter before I got leukemia. And then I forgot how to do Twitter. 4 years off Twitter, I just forgot how to do it. So now, of course, I'm trying to learn it again. But I mean, that's just an obvious thing. But there are just so many things in the world right now that I'm not. I feel the world has changed so much during the years that I was both sick and then during COVID.
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's so much I don't know. I mean, I try to. You try to be in the world to the extent that you can, always. I think that's the key to not aging, mental, if you can, just to be in the world, to be curious. And I think we're both curious about what's going on politically, what's happening in other people's lives, what's happening in other novels and books. I mean, you have to keep it up. You have to just keep that going. What else is there? Right.
I know. And it gets more difficult. It does when you get older. It just, and you've been sick. It does just gets harder because you have to restart it.
Well, when you described an exhaustion where you couldn't lift a cell phone.
Yeah, that was true when I was very sick. My cell phone was like it weighed 1,000,000 pounds. I couldn't. I mean, I've never even imagined being that weak. And by the way, I really described it like I was feral because I was so single-mindedly wanting to be taken out of this misery that, I just would tell anyone I summoned, every doctor I'd ever had a relationship with, would they come to my room? Would they let me go? And it was all my friends, my poor friends. I would just say, tell Peter he has to let me go. And Peter just believed, one, I was immensely depressed and extremely sick, but that I was going to get well. And because the medicine, he was reading the science, and my stem cell transplant had taken.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was very strange to write my book because I had to research a lot of it because I didn't remember things in the hospital. I was in the ICU. I have no memory of ever being in an ICU. And Meredith said to me, you were in the ICU and you were swearing at everyone. And that's also not like me. So, but in the context of writing it as a book, it was kind of, fabulous, It was like a treasure hunt for these moments of drama, that I could experiencing them as a writer rather than as that patient. And so it was kind of, interviewing everybody, them telling me these really shocking things. Like my poor friend Gail Monaco, who I corralled in the lobby. She lived in my building. I corralled her the day I found out I needed a stem cell transplant and that if I didn't, I would die. And I only had a 20% chance of survival. So I dragged her up. This is all in the book, but I dragged her up to my apartment, and I really, she's a therapist, and I needed a therapist on this journey. And I really begged her to take it with me. And she said to me when I interviewed her that I was in complete undefended terror, that my terror was so great that she was just sucked into it. And then when we walked to the elevator, she told me that she got in the elevator and I said to her, it's very important that you love me. Now, I honestly, I barely knew this person. I have no idea how those words popped out of my mouth. I had no memory, but I said, no, Gail, I did not say that. Oh, yes, she said, you did. I mean, she's a therapist. I'm sure she's telling me the truth.
What is?
But I mean, what?
What does Peter think that?
I don't even know why I said it.
Did you ask Peter what he thought?
That means,
why you said
no,
that?
I didn't. I will. Why I needed that too. You mean why I needed her to love me in addition to just showing up all the time and listening to me in the hospital? I have no idea.
I'm sure she was.
I have no idea.
Yeah. Well,
I'll ask what she thinks I thought it meant. But she said to me, "That's okay, Delia, because I do love you." It was the sweetest thing. But as I said, I don't remember this. Nevertheless,
I'm sure it happened. I know it's so emotional. It's so emotional.
Hello, ladies.
Hello.
There is one question, and I thought I would ask it. Nell Painter asked, would either of you feel chagrin if I praised your work as quote unquote old studies?
Old studies? What is old studies?
I don't know. I figured you would. Nell, you can comment in the comment if you want to clarify your question.
Yeah, I'm not sure what she means, but I'm very curious now too. Maybe she means like I don't know. I don't want to speak for her, but
well, what? She can even I figured you would probably, might have been an inside thing or that you might have known about it. So passing along.
Okay.
We're gonna be staying up late tonight Googling old studies.
Definitely.
I think, Delia, you mentioned what you were
I just
reading.
said one thing, which is that, you know, it's very special that Nora had this great quality of inviting writers on film trips. And so Meg, more than normally would happen, was included in the journey when we made her movie, and I think you were in casting sessions and all sorts of things. So it was such a fantastic beginning for our friendship.
It was absolutely wonderful. I see Nell is there, but let me just speak to it very quickly. Absolutely, I felt welcomed. I felt absolutely welcomed by Nora and Delia. Yeah, sitting in casting sessions in Nora's living room and going to comedy clubs with you both and looking at comedians and having a say where you know, I've never forgotten it, and I still feel as welcome now. So thank you for that. So Nell is saying there's no such thing yet, but we have studies of fields we specialize in, like women's studies. I see. So of people in older life, old studies. I think that's what she's saying.
Old people studies?
That's what I think. Now we have to think of ourselves.
Is that like hearing a kid come in and saying they're taking the history of the Vietnam War? Because you're older, you have a perspective?
I'm not sure, but I think I don't know. Maybe it's looking back, or maybe it's being older. I don't know, but I'll take it, Nell. Whatever it is, yes, do it. I don't know. I don't really.
I think that's just marginalizing us.
No.
I think my love story is as powerful for a younger person to read as it is for an older person to read. So I think that's marginalization.
Oh, I don't think. Yeah. Okay. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. I don't. That's the problem with doing things on Zoom.
Yeah.
You know, you have to. We want a conversation that be back and forth, like remember readings when you'd stand up and someone would talk to you. Remember that?
I think bookstores are beginning to struggle with that now. I'm having my first poetry event on Friday, and it'll be interesting. People have to fill out a form saying that they're vaccinated and they're going to wear a mask when they come here, and we'll just dip a toe in the water. But I'm hearing it from the group conversations that we're having on Zoom. We've had them every week in the Northeast, and people talk about how are you doing this? How do you feel about this? And I think very carefully, because we desperately want to be together. And so I see your friendship here, and I know it'd be great to sit around a coffee table and be having this conversation and sort of, but I feel like the fly on the wall, the listening to your friendship and your conversation and the things that you discuss, it enriches all of your work for me. You know, so I have to thank you for such an impactful evening and such wonderful work, and the discussion that came out of it has enriched all of us. So I hate to end tonight, but we've come to the conclusion, and I'd like to thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
Oh yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, of course. Thank you, Meg and Delia, for participating in Write America this evening, and to everyone who tuned in tonight. And thank you to Roger Rosenblatt for creating this original and important series to look forward to each Monday evening. Tonight's episode is the perfect example of the purpose and mission of Write America. We hope to see you next Monday at 7 as we welcome James and Deborah Fallows. Please remember to check out Bird's Book Write America page, where you can sign up for upcoming episodes and maybe purchase a book or two. Thank you all for attending this evening. Have a good one.